Homive Sarantu, Councilman Whitman, Sir Sandra McPherson, and obviously we just heard from Councilman Venice Williams. And if I've missed one, I know I'll hear about it soon. We're living in a time of contradiction, a time of great contradiction in this city and in this country. We're living at a time when unemployment in this country is at 3.4%, the lowest it has been in 54 years. And here in Toledo, our income tax collections last year grew by an incredible 18%. I mean, those are signs of a strong economy. However, we're also living at a time when inflation and supply chain delays have driven up the price of everything, especially gas and groceries, in a way that makes it tough for everyday families to get by. So what is it? Is the economy strong or not? We live in a city with one of the best zoos in the country, one of the best museums in the country, with literally the best park system in the country. And I saw Matt Killam from the Metro Parks here earlier. That's not just hometown boosterism. They were ranked #1 in the entire country. And we're living at a time when there are more programs for kids in this city than we have ever had, ever. Yet, according to the surveys we've done, we're living at a time where too many kids, too many young people think there's nothing to do in Toledo. And they don't see their future in this city, or at best a limited future in this city. And yes, we are living at a time when this year, calendar year 2023, we've begun to see some evidence that our challenge with gun violence maybe, hopefully, is getting better. This is wood, so I'll knock on it. But we have had no gun-related homicides in our city in almost 2 months. Doesn't mean we're spiking the ball in the end zone, but maybe we're seeing the beginnings of progress. But yet we're also living at a time when this good news, this period without gun violence, since February 3rd, almost 2 months without gun violence, it only comes after a 2-year period where we all saw more gun violence than any of us can bear. And too many people don't feel safe in their neighborhoods. So it's a time of great contradiction. The problems of the world are hard enough to solve, even if we could agree on what the problems are. But we're living at a time where sometimes we don't even know what's up or what's down. Now, I tell you, if this was Washington, D.C., they'd have the answers just like that. Why? Because in Washington, D.C., everything is red state, blue state, zero-sum game. The Democrats would say that the reason unemployment is so low is that President Biden is doing such an awesome job, but the Republicans would say that the reason inflation is so high and gas and groceries are so high because Biden's doing a terrible job. And Democrats would blame Republicans for that. Republicans say it's just a mess. It's a mess, and people are sick of it. Fortunately, we don't live in Washington, D.C. We live in the real world. We live in Toledo, Ohio. And in Toledo, Ohio, in the real world, we don't see problems as opportunities to score cheap political points. We see problems as things that need to be solved. The world isn't black and white. We know that in Toledo. There are shades of gray. There's middle ground. There's compromise. The best mayor in this country's history was a short little guy from New York named Fiorello LaGuardia, only known by most folks now for the airport named after him. He has a number of great quotes about municipal government, and one goes like this, that there's 3 kinds of people in the world: Democrats, Republicans, and mayors. And with the city council in attendance tonight, I might say that if Mayor LaGuardia were here, he would say Democrats, Republicans, and mayors and council. His point is the same, that the work of mayors, the work of city council, the work of local government isn't partisan. It's not political. He's actually the one who came up with the line that potholes aren't partisan. There is no Republican way to plow snow. There is no Democratic Party way to collect leaves. All we see are problems that need to be solved. City council, mayors, we are hired to solve problems. We're not hired to get involved in ideological debates. Let the folks in Washington do that. We're hired to solve problems. How do we do that? People have different approaches. I'll tell you how I try to do it. And for better or for worse, this is my 6th year as mayor. You know me by now. I don't give a lot of hugs. I'm not a hugger. I think, thoughtful, serious. I think we solve our problems with calm, serious, thoughtful action. Not hysterical exaggeration, oversimplification, political theater. Let other folks do that. I believe we solve our problems by confronting them head on, being honest about what they are, talking about them in plain terms, and then developing a plan to address them. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and everything in between. We're going to talk about what's going right. We're going to talk about what's not going right. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how we can build upon what's going right and how we can improve upon what maybe isn't going the way we want it to be, and outline some challenges for the future. So let's get into it, Toledo. And we're going to confront it head on. Let's start with one of the things that we all know isn't going, the way we want it to, and that is gun violence. I talked about it at the outset, and we're going to address it right here at the outset. We're going to talk about this. We all know that we have seen more gun violence in Toledo and frankly in America over the last 2 or 3 years than any one of us can accept. Now, maybe some of it had to do with the pandemic, and in fact it almost certainly did. Why else would this be happening all over the country at the exact same time? It's happening everywhere, and it started about 3 or 4 years ago. What happened? Well, I'm sure the pandemic had some role, whether it clogged up the judicial system, whether it introduced anxiety into the lives of Americans, it closed businesses and shut schools. I mean, it was rough. And I think there probably is some truth to the theory that the violence we've seen in America was due to the pandemic to some extent. Now, as I've mentioned, we've started to see, at the very least, baby steps of progress in the right direction. Again, I'm going to say it again. We have not seen any gun violence in the city of Toledo, no homicides, since February 3rd. That is the longest period without gun violence in our city since April of 2019, 4 years. Interestingly, that's before the pandemic. This is the month of March. We've had no homicides in March. There are 2 days left in March. If we have the week we want to have, March could end up being only the second month in the last 4 years with no homicides in our city. These are encouraging steps in the right direction. And maybe if the spike nationwide was caused by the pandemic, maybe the further we get away from it, things are naturally going to improve. Maybe. But maybe some of the ideas, some of the strategies we employed didn't work as well as we'd like them to. Maybe that. I have always said, since the first day I was mayor, across the board on everything, whether we're fixing roads, addressing gun violence, or keeping our water clean, that we are going to try things. We're going to try things in my administration. Some of them are going to work, some of them aren't going to work. The ones that do work, we'll continue them. We'll celebrate our success and we'll keep doing them. But the things that don't work, we're going to learn from our mistakes, we'll dust ourselves off, and then we're going to try something else. And then we're going to try something else after that. That is the attitude that we are taking on gun violence, and that's what brings us to Cities United, something I want to spend a few minutes talking about in serious terms, because I still think the public might have questions about what it is, what it isn't, and what it can do for us. So I'm going to talk for a few minutes about that. As I do so, I want to recognize the accomplishments and the leadership of Councilwoman Tiffany Whitman, who on her own, through her own advocacy and her own research, came across Cities United as an organization that could provide help to us. I, through a network of mayors, also discovered Cities United, and we sort of realized late last fall we're both working on the same thing. And we've come together with an approach that we think can make a difference. Cities United came to Toledo about a month ago. They were in town for about a dozen meetings, and they weren't just random neighborhood meetings, they were meetings with specific constituency groups. There was a meeting with the business community, a meeting with mental health providers, meeting with healthcare providers in general, meeting with prosecutors and judges, meeting with pastors. A number of very specific meetings where they talked about their plan and their model. They presented some data at those sessions, and one set of data was heavy on my heart when I saw it a month ago, and it's still heavy on my heart today. And I think to begin this conversation, we want to put these pie charts up on the screen, even if only for a brief moment. These pie charts describe the victims and suspects of gun violence in Toledo over the last 7 years. And what jumps out at you immediately is, unfortunately, in a city that is about 51% female and 49% male, it is overwhelmingly men who are at risk of the gun violence we are seeing. And in a city where our population is roughly 62% Caucasian, 27% African American, 11% Hispanic, Asian, and other, it is overwhelmingly, almost 75% over the last 7 years, are African Americans who are facing this challenge. And in a city where about half of us are old folks like me, over the age of 35, the individuals involved in this, who face this challenge, again, are overwhelmingly young. And that's for both the victims and the suspects. We're talking about a disproportionate negative impact on primarily younger African American men. Obviously, everyone is affected by it. But if we can begin there and understand that, it does give us a guide maybe on what we can do to be better. Cities United believes that we have an ecosystem in our lives, and we do. And every city has an ecosystem. What is the ecosystem? It's kind of a big word, maybe. Here's what it really means, is that in all of our lives, all of us, we have a family. Maybe we have a priest or a rabbi who's important to us. Maybe we have a soccer coach or a mentor. Maybe we've made decisions that put us in touch with the police department or the criminal justice system. We certainly have a school that is important to us if we're younger. All of these dots exist in our lives, and we have an ecosystem here in Toledo. I agree with those who say, heck, we don't need any ideas from outside people. Why do we have to talk to folks from Louisville or Timbuktu to solve? We don't. We don't need any help from any outside voices to solve our problems. We know how to do that right here. We have all the talent we need in Toledo. What I think, though, is that our ecosystem, sometimes it doesn't talk to each other very well. Sometimes we can be really siloed here in Toledo. And so the school system might not know that a young person's, that something's happening in his life. So maybe the school doesn't interact with the mental health provider in the way that it should. Maybe the pastor doesn't interact with the social service agency in the way it could. Maybe the police department, the criminal justice system is unaware of what's happening at the school. There's all of these pieces in all of our lives that sometimes don't connect the way they should. All Cities United is an attempt to connect those dots. That's all it is. And there's a lot of good dots that we have in this community. One of the reasons we picked this location tonight for this speech is because we have violence interrupters that work with us. I still believe that people don't quite understand what they do, and that's probably my fault for not explaining it well. They don't work downtown. They're not in charge of every good or bad things that happens in the city. Actually, they work out of this building. They report to work in this building and go out in neighborhoods like this. And they are part of the ecosystem. They're one part of it. Those violence interrupters are a part. Family's a part. The school's a part. The church is a part. The police department can be a part. All these parts that I don't think are coordinated as well as they could be. We need to coordinate it better. And Cities United is our attempt just to make sure that the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. And I think we can make a difference if we commit to that. I'll tell you another part of our ecosystem. It's a new organization called the Coalition for Peaceful Neighborhoods. It's organized by, I think, four previous mayors. They have a lot of passion. They have organized neighborhood meetings, and I am so thankful for the effort that they have brought forth. They brought forth ideas and plans. I think they have a 12-point plan. There's a lot of great ideas in there. You know, they're maybe not maybe the ideas aren't new. The city is doing 10 or so, 10 of the 12 ideas at least. And so some people dismiss their efforts because the ideas are old and we're already implementing so many of them. Not me. I'm thankful that we have people in our community who care so much to spend their time organizing and trying to solve this problem. They're part of our ecosystem too. I think they'd be the first to tell you they don't have all the answers. They can't. They're part of that network that, if it's working well, can help people succeed. And I am deeply thankful for their leadership and hard work, and I look forward to continuing to work with them and everyone else in our ecosystem to continue to build upon, you know, the 2 months of good news that we have seen. Cities United didn't pop up overnight. They have been working with cities for over 10 years, and there are over 130 cities that they work with. Working with so many cities, they have been able to develop some data that speak to trends that cities dealing with gun violence face. Here's the one that stuck out to me, and I think if you understand nothing else about Cities United, nothing else about our efforts, understand this slide right here. What they have found is that in any city, pick a city, you take the population of that city, 1% of that overall population are folks who are at risk of the gun violence that we see too often in our country. And then of that subset, 10% of that are the individuals who are most at risk of, it's not a very elegant way of saying it, but of either being a shooter or a victim. So in our city, a city of 271,000 people, there's 2,700 folks who are at risk, and there's about 270 there are 270 people that we need to connect with. The reason this slide was so important to me is because it reminded me of something that Chief Krull, our former police chief, had long told me as we talked about this issue. He said, it's so frustrating. We're a city of 280,000 people, and there's a small handful, he said it was 100, maybe he was off by a little bit. There's 100 people who are engaged in a West Side Story revenge drama on the streets that all of us have, but there's 100 people. We know who they are. And by the way, when we met with the judges and the juvenile justice system, they all agreed, yeah, 100, 150, while Cities United would say it's 200. That's not, here's the point. That number, I think, is gettable. I think we can identify these individuals, these human beings who live in our community, and do a deep dive into their lives and make sure that their ecosystem is working. That's what this, and more than anything else, that's what this is about. We know the number isn't large. In many cases, we know the names of the 271 people. We need to make sure that their ecosystem is working. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we're going to continue to do, and we're going to need all the help we can to continue to build upon some of the successes that we've seen. Now, as we do this, it's important that we remain tethered to the facts. I'm a numbers person, And so this time every year, I am drawn to the data that always comes out. Justice Department, FBI, this time of year, they always come out with data that sort of ranks cities based on where they are on a number of different scores. But there are some data sets that came out that I think are important to talk about before we conclude this conversation about gun violence. U.S. News and World Reports, again, dealing with Justice Department data that was just released. I saw they came out with a list of the 25 most dangerous places in the United States. And I looked at the list, and I looked at it, and I kept looking, and I didn't find Toledo. It's okay, there's another list that's out there. This is a list of the top 50, well, it wasn't the top 50, it's a list of the most violent cities. This is violent crime per 1,000 residents. And so I looked, and I didn't see that we were at the top. I didn't see that we were in the top 10, or the top 20, or the top 40, or even the top 50. Now I kept looking, and I found Toledo, unfortunately. We were number 68. We're the 68th most violent city in America based on violent crimes per 1,000 citizens. That's real, and that's a problem. It's important to talk about that. It's right to want to solve this problem. It's right to want to help to solve this problem. It is wrong to exaggerate the problem, to hyperventilate about it, to engage in political theater over it. We're number 68. That's not where I want to be. I think if we work together, next year we won't be in the top 75. Year after that, we won't be in the top 100. That's the right way to approach this. We have to know where we are. We have to know what reality is before we can solve a problem. There's always going to be folks who want to distract. Fact of the matter is, we have a challenge, but we can overcome it. The numbers are not so overwhelming. If we're talking about 271 people, we can do this. We can make a difference in their lives. And working together, we can make a real difference. And I think some of the work we have done has already begun to pay off. That's the way we attack problems. That's the way we're going to continue to do it, with a thoughtful, serious approach that is tethered to the facts, not exaggerations, hyperbole, and drama, but facts. We're seeing the beginnings of some progress. It's the longest period without gun violence in our city in over 4 years. Let's keep it going. And we need everyone's help to achieve that. There's also some good things that are happening in Toledo. And I'm happy to report that this section of the speech is a lot longer than the section of the speech where things aren't going as well. And anything pertaining to what's good in Toledo has to include our economy. And our economy really has shown resilience and strength over the last several years. Site Selection magazine, for 6 of the last 7 years, has ranked us in the top 10, not in Ohio, not in our zip code, top 10 in the nation in terms of new business investment. In 2020, we were number 1 in the entire country. Business Facilities magazine this year ranked us number 5 in the country for manufacturing. I began the speech by talking about the 18% increase in our income tax collections. That doesn't happen unless your economy is strong. We're doing well in this area, and a lot of it is due to the big projects that we've all celebrated recently. The old Northtown Mall, otherwise known as the place I met Muhammad Ali when I was 8 years old, is not a mall anymore. It is now a site where soon 1,000 high-paying union jobs will be located supplying the auto industry. GM, we celebrated their announcement last year. They took $760 million of their own money, and GM knows a little something about turning a profit. They're the 10th largest company in our country. They believe that making a $760 million investment in Toledo will make them more money. And now we're not going to be making transmissions over on Alexis Road. We're going to be making propulsion systems to distribute electricity throughout automobiles. Next to the Jeep site, 300 more jobs came online last year at the Vehicle Customization Center at the old MedCourse site, the old textile leather site. We celebrated the grand opening of a new high-end hotel downtown, thanks to our partners in the county. We saw the old Seagate Center turn into the Glass City Center and some reimagined space and one of the best views of downtown anywhere. The Jefferson Center on July 1st will be open. Bitwise, the data company, I see someone literally cheering for that in the back row, so There's a Bitwise fan among us. These are tech jobs that we attracted from Fresno, 300 of those jobs, and I'm told a restaurant open to the public is going to be available to all of us as of July 1st. That's progress, and those big wins are important. But people ask me all the time, what's the biggest, who's the biggest employer in Toledo? What's our biggest business? Is it ProMedica? Is it Jeep? Our biggest business is small business. You add up all of those small businesses, they are the backbone of our economy, and we want to help them too. Our Vibrancy Initiative has identified 12 projects that have benefited from $410,000 for facade grants to improve the outside of structures that are so important to small businesses. 7 other projects have accessed $500,000, and together, through the facade and the white box initiative, they've leveraged over $11 million of private dollars to make their buildings ready to be developed. That's an important part of giving a boost to our small business, and we're happy to say that we've done it. We're trying to be even friendlier. In the last year, we unveiled some digital tools that are helpful. Permit Planner to help small businesses navigate what is sometimes a very Byzantine and bureaucratic series of steps. And in concert with the local Chamber of Commerce, something called the RAMP, which is a toolkit and an information portal where any one of a dozen or so different questions that a small business person might have about what he or she needs to do to open a business is contained right there at a click of a button, very friendly, and not yet unveiled, but it will be part of our lives very soon, an e-plan review app, so that architects can submit their plans online, quicker, more efficient, in a way that's friendly to business. Our economic successes are real, but I'm one who believes until that same energy and those same wins are celebrated in our neighborhoods, it's going to feel empty, a little empty. We need everyone to feel the momentum we have, and nowhere better does that happen than in a neighborhood. Again, that's part of the reason we're here tonight. Roz Clemens, our Director of Neighborhoods, and with my now 50-year-old eyes, I am struggling to see if she is with us tonight, but if she's not, she should be. I want to give her credit as the Director of the Department of Neighborhoods. She has brought more federal money into this community for things like mortgage assistance, rental assistance, rehabbing homes, down payments, than she ever gets credit for. Essentially, the federal government sends out dollars, and you can see on the screen some of the things that our department has done. They send those dollars to other cities. Other cities aren't as good as Roz in connecting those dollars to the people who need them. That's right, she deserves applause. And so the federal government asks those cities for their money back. And when they do, they direct it to Roz because they know that she can connect those dollars to people who need it. And there are tens of thousands of people in this community who have benefited from those programs, from the tens of millions of dollars that she has brought. And I want to give her that special recognition. Big part of neighborhoods, and again, when you talk neighborhoods, you got to talk basic infrastructure, sidewalks and roads. Thanks to a vote of City Council just last week, we're going to fix more sidewalks this year than we ever have before. In fact, from a sense of scope, as this slide will tell you, last year, it's not that we fixed, I want to make sure you understand this math. It's not that we fixed 130 sidewalks. We fixed the sidewalks in front of 130 properties. That's how we keep track of this. That was last year. This year, because of the leadership of City Council, we're fixing the sidewalks in front of 1,300 properties. That's a 10-time increase in 1 year. It'll set the record, and I hope we enjoy the record because it's only going to last 1 year. Next year, we're going to fix even more. This is all a part of the Vision Zero plan, which Councilman Meldon has worked so hard at to make sure that there are no traffic deaths in our city by 2031. The way you design a neighborhood has a lot to do with whether pedestrians are safe, whether there are going to be traffic deaths. Do you have sidewalks you can walk on, or do you have to walk in the road? It's all part of it. I'm so thankful that City Council has put us in a position to quite literally grow tenfold the amount of sidewalks that we're going to fix this year. And that might sound impressive until you reflect upon what we've done on road reconstruction. I've said it before and I'll say it again here. Before the Toledo roads levy passed in 2020, we resurfaced 7 roads. Not 7 lane miles, 7 roads. About 2 to 3 lane miles a year, depending upon the year. The Toledo roads levy passed, and it has been an incredible boon to the neighborhoods of Toledo. Now we resurface well over 100 roads a year. Not 7, hundreds. That's a 15 to 20-fold increase in what we used to do. And in terms of lane miles, now we do somewhere between 40 and 50 lane miles a year, not 2 or 3 like we used to do. It's one of the reasons we're making so much progress here, but a word of caution. I just want to explain the situation we face as Toledoans. We have 1,300 lane miles of road in our city. Didn't know that before I became mayor? Now I know it. Because of our engineers, I also know that 62% of those roads need reconstruction today. That's 800 lane miles. So you can see, despite the progress we've made, and it's incredible to grow the amount of road reconstruction 15 and 20-fold in a 2 or 3 year span, it's incredible. But even at this pace, when you understand that there's 800 lane miles that need to be fixed, it's going to take us 15 to 20 years to fix all of our roads. And that's assuming that the roads that are currently in good condition don't deteriorate over the next 15 to 20 years. This is all a little bit of a preview into my 2024 State of the City speech, where I will be encouraging the citizens of Toledo to renew the Toledo Roads Levy when it expires next year. It's doing good work. We have to make sure that it continues to work for us. I think neighborhoods, I think housing. We've talked a lot about the need for affordable housing in our community, and with ARP dollars, we are constructing 600 units of affordable housing, places like Driggs Dairy, the Secor Senior Lofts over in West Toledo. We also need market rate housing, and we've put an emphasis on that through the creation of the Market Rate Housing Working Group. Again, Councilman Whitman has been a leader on that with us. If you've driven by Westgate recently, you'll notice there's not an Elder Beerman there anymore. There's not a Sears there anymore. Soon there will be 200 to 300 units of market rate housing. The Colony over near Toledo Hospital, that's a $58 million mixed use development. It's also going to be 262 new Toledoans. That's how I look at this, new Toledoans. The reality is there has not been one single subdivision platted within the municipal boundary of Toledo in 40 years. We began to turn the corner a couple years ago with the Frank Cass development down on the river, the Marina Lofts, which are hugely successful. There's a waiting list. That's the first market rate housing we've had in about a generation. We need to do more. We need to, you want to grow our population, we need to make sure that there are places for people to live. So whether it's the 262 units at the Colony, whether it's the 200 or 300 units that are going to replace the demolished Elder Beerman and Sears, whether it's the Four Corners downtown, the most important intersection of downtown, the only one where there are buildings on all 4 corners, that's going to be 367 new Toledoans. And we have finally gained control of that property. We have finally selected a developer, and there's a lot of work ahead of us, but 367 new Toledoans are going to have a place to live there. We also have other spots throughout the city, other plots of earth that we want to expand upon this work. These villas that are so attractive, particularly to older citizens. Maybe you live in a, maybe you're my parents' age, and I think my father was supposed to be here. I don't see him here. Maybe he's having a hard time walking up the stairs. That's the segue I was going to make. When you get to be my mom and dad's age, there he is awkwardly waving in the back. So great. That's what happens when you're late. When you're late, you get called out in front of the whole class. Point is, when you get to be my parents' age, it's not as fun walking up and down the stairs. And so many seniors are attracted to these villas that you see in Lambertville and Bedford and Temperance and Waterville. We need some of those in Toledo so that we can have options for our seniors who live in Toledo who don't want to move out. When I think of neighborhoods, I think of demolition and code compliance and the hard work we've done there. You're going to see a slide of the blight that they removed, and they have removed in the past year. It's an incredible amount. Almost all of it, though, goes to the Landfill. Now, fortunately, the Department of Services this year spent $4.1 million for phase one of a new cell at the Hoffman Road landfill, which is going to extend the use of that landfill basically to the end of this century. And that is a productive step in the right direction. We need to recycle more also, however. We had 24 specific events last year, targeted events where we essentially met the citizens of Toledo where they are, and we collected over 22,000 tires, 470 tons of debris, 21,000 gallons of paint. We got to do more of that. We took a big, in fact, this year we're going to have at least 26 of those events, so we are going to do more. We took a big step on creating our own municipal recycling facility this year. It's called a MRF, Municipal Recycling Facility. Not only is it good for the earth, and we know that, it also saves us some money. Right now, because we don't have a facility to recycle here in the city of Toledo, we spend $400,000 a year taking our recycling to Lorain County. Why do that? Let's do that here in Toledo, and the steps we've taken to build our own MRF will go a long way toward making sure that we're doing right by the earth and saving the taxpayers some money. Demolition is sometimes part of what we need to do. Through our partnership with the Land Bank, this slide shows where we have demolished vacant and blighted properties that couldn't be saved. We're going to do 1,000 more of them this year. Many of them are residential spaces, but occasionally we have victories like the ones we celebrated last year when we were able to demolish the old Rosemary Apartments on Phillips in Detroit, which was not just an eyesore, not just a blight. It was actually a site where a tragedy took place and a young person was killed in that building several years ago. Now we've been able to demolish it, and there's 1,000 more that are coming this year. We don't always want to demolish. We like to invest and build and grow, and that's what we're doing in community centers like this. There are 9 community centers where we're making major upgrades this year. HVAC, lighting, landscaping, facades, interiors. Here at Frederick Douglass, it includes basketball courts. But it's an important component of having livable neighborhoods where we all can thrive. So much of this pertains to our environment. And among the things that we're doing this year, yeah, we're gonna plant a bunch of trees too. We're growing the city's tree canopy. I have a saying, and I believe it to my core: nothing bad ever came from a tree. A tree cleans the air. The root structure protects our lakes and streams. Trees slow traffic. There's all kinds of data that says when you don't even realize you're doing it, but when you're driving down a tree-lined road, you take your foot off the gas gently because you don't know if a kid's going to jump out, maybe chasing the ball that went into the street. Trees increase property values. That's why I'm excited to report that we are going to plant twice as many trees. We're going to double the number of trees that we plant in our city from where we did last year. Pen 7 is a location on our riverfront where we are creating a new green space. I have long been frustrated that we have such a great resource in our community. We're on a Great Lake. We're on the largest river, the largest tributary that spills into any of the Great Lakes. And yet we haven't taken advantage of that as well as we should have. It almost as if our city founders at some point said, boy, this is such a delightful blessing, what a great place to put a pile of salt. And while salt is important, we need to get citizens to our waterfronts to enjoy it. Pen 7 will do that. The commitment of our city council around the environment is second to none. I want to give special kudos to Councilman Komives, Councilman Gaddis, Councilman Meldon for leading the effort to create a 1% for the environment. Toledo was the first, if not the first city, one of the first cities in the country 40 years ago to set aside 1% of its budget for the arts. One of the reasons we have such a vibrant arts community, and it's not just the museum, it's the individual artisans, the glassmakers. So much of that goes back to the leadership of City Council setting aside 1% of our budget every year for the arts. Because of the leadership of City Council, Councilman Komives in particular, we have a 1% for the environment now. And it will fund programs and initiatives and ideas to make sure that we have a sustainable future. And it actually won us an award from Power a Clean Future Ohio, an award that I collected down in Columbus, and then I gave it to City Council as soon as I got back to town because they deserve it. It's important that we continue to work for our earth. Kids are a pretty big, important part of our future. I know it's a cliche, but darn it, it's true. And if you've heard me talk at all in the last year or so, you've heard me brag about all of the programming that we offer for kids. It's true. 60,000 kids took advantage in the programs that we offered last year. That is a 4.5 times increase. That's 4.5 times higher than the amount of kids who participated in 2021. And in 2021, that had been the record. You've heard me talk about the 110 programs for kids we had last year. This year, we're doing 110. I want to do a callback, though, to an earlier slide in the presentation and try to link some of these things together. You bet I'm excited that 60,000 kids took advantage of our, and again, it's not just sports programs. It's, you want to learn how to podcast, you want to learn how to code. I honestly think we had one that taught kids how to ride a horse. I mean, we had everything. And we're having 10 more this year. It's great that so many kids took advantage of it. We need to make sure that those who are most vulnerable, most at risk, are benefiting not just from our youth programming, but everything we're trying to do. I know that 60,000 kids benefited from our programming. I don't know if any of the 271 did. I don't know that. We need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to link everything we do to the folks who could really benefit from those programs. So being aware of it is the first step to making it happen. I didn't introduce him earlier because I didn't see him, but I want to recognize the President of City Council, Matt Cherry, and give him credit for the next slide that you're about to see, because our commitment to our youth continues with the Schneider soccer complex that's taking shape in his council district near Bowser High School. This is going to be a regional attraction that's going to bring folks from all over Southeast Michigan, Northwest Ohio for tournaments and such, and Matt's leadership helped make that a possibility. Venice Williams, who we heard from earlier, was a leader on this next slide. The new PAL facility over on Manhattan is online and ready to go this year. It's ready for kids to play in it this year. We're improving playgrounds all over the city. Maya, Clinton, Drummond Woods, Highland, Corbin Parks are getting new playground equipment this year, and we've already begun the engineering that will produce new playgrounds next year in Hathaway, Nelson Grace, Polonia, Prentice, and Burnett Parks. Not every young person in our community, however, has an easy road. And some face challenges that are hard for many of us to imagine, including the challenge of homelessness. I'm happy to report that through a partnership with Lutheran Social Services, the Toledo Public School System, we were able to help 500 kids become housed. It's hard enough to learn algebra on its own. It's almost impossible to learn the lessons that you have to learn in school when you don't know, when your stomach's growling and you don't know where you're going to sleep that night. Thanks to that partnership, we're making a real difference. We're making a real difference. And the final thing I want to say as we talk about youth and neighborhoods is, those who know me know this is the thing I am most excited about of all the things that are going on in the city of Toledo. We're going to break ground this year. We're going to put shovels in the ground to bring a long overdue, long needed, brand new YMCA to the Warren-Sherman neighborhood. And I can't wait. And since you know it wouldn't be a speech of mine without an unusual historical factoid, I will point out that when this facility was built in 1976, when the Frederick Douglass Community Center was built, Wayman Palmer, the individual, the human being, Wayman Palmer, was the director of neighborhoods. And so he helped build this building, and we're going to continue to honor him with the new YMCA in his name over in the Warren-Sherman neighborhood. Our safety forces do so much for us, we can never thank them. I know our fire chief isn't able to be here tonight. She's with her family. But she's happy to report that 63 new firefighters graduated last year, bringing our total to 558. That is the highest sworn strength that we've had in decades. We now can staff all of our frontline apparatus every day. The public outreach part of our fire department distributed 2,000 smoke alarms. Seems like a small thing, but sometimes in this world we wonder, Jesus, the stuff I'm doing, does it even make a difference? Well, there are 6 documented cases, maybe only 6, but darn it, this is a pretty important. 6 cases where we can prove that those smoke alarms saved a human life. And that's a heck of a thing. That's a heck of a thing to know that you accomplished, and we thank our fire department for that. Our police department every day is at the forefront of protecting us. We talked a lot about the improvements we've seen, the 2 months without gun violence in our community. We want to see that continue, of course. That only will happen with a police chief that can continue to lead our department in the right direction. We've gone through a very involved process, and I can say it was the most difficult decision I've made as mayor. I have anguished and thought on this and gotten so much advice from so many people over the last several weeks and months. I'm excited to report that tomorrow at 1 o'clock, down in my office, we're going to announce my choice to be our permanent police chief for the city of Toledo. That police department has done some excellent work. Last year, there were 6 targeted efforts. They all had acronyms depending on the name of the neighborhood they were focused on, but they were called team efforts. They're targeted enforcement activities. And so take about 2 or 3 weeks, and they do a deep dive in a neighborhood. And yes, it is true, sometimes they arrest folks that need to be arrested. But they also, over the course of last year, they found 133 kids that should have been in school who weren't. They found city nuisances. They towed abandoned cars. They picked up abandoned tires. These were projects in the LaGrange area. It was called LASER, the LaGrange Area Strategic Enforcement. And in 5 points, it was called Phaser. In East Toledo, it was called Essex. And actually tomorrow at our news conference on the police chief, we're going to announce the results of Essex 2, a coordinated approach that we took to the East Toledo neighborhood just over these last several weeks. Transparency is so important to our police department, and that's why I'm happy to announce that there's a new website. Go to toledopolice.com and you'll see more data than you can ever want at your fingertips that connect the people and the police officers who serve them. Serving our citizens at the end of the day is the core of what we do. In this last year, we've done so many unique things, I think, to try to serve the citizens of Toledo. The brand new Snow Angels project quite literally sent volunteers to the homes of primarily seniors, maybe who needed, medicine or needed groceries. We sent volunteers out to shovel, I think I said mow, but I should have said shovel, to shovel their sidewalks, to shovel their driveways. The open data tool is a portal where you can find information on DORA districts, construction projects, bike trails, anything. Engage Toledo is the way that most people interact with our city. Engage Toledo gets 90,000 calls a year, and incredibly enough, the average length of time is 4 minutes and 4 seconds. From the time you pick up that phone until the time your problem is addressed is 4 minutes and 4 seconds. That is incredible. That's an incredible turnaround and a great credit to our employees who help interface with citizens who need basic service delivery. Our Kid Mayor program, and you heard a little bit about our Kid Mayor program earlier today with our Kid Mayor Gabby, is a great way for us to involve younger people in the decisions we make. And we have an ambassador program for Kids at Heart, slightly older citizens, essentially doing a Kid Mayor program for grown-ups. We've been doing that for several years. There are now 200 graduates of that program, folks who are involved at the neighborhood level that can be our eyes and ears, but frankly can communicate to their neighbors how city operations affect them, and they can give us feedback on how we can be better. And the best way, the most robust way we can engage with the public is doing a long-term plan to study the sort of city we should be. We're a city that's almost 200 years old. And in almost 200 years, we've only 3 times engaged in a long-term planning process. We're doing that again. It's called Forward Toledo. We've already had 32 public meetings, 350 comments, 3,000 surveys filled out, and by the end of this week, we're going to hear an announcement for even more meetings. Be a part of that. Help put your fingerprint on the future that you want for your city. It's It's also okay to have a little fun, and we're going to have a little fun this year. Some unique, maybe quirky events, but darn it, they're going to be fun. The Italian Super Bowl is coming to Toledo, and whenever I talk about this, people, they hear Italy, they assume it's soccer. It's not soccer. There are American football leagues all over Europe, including in Italy, and they're playing their regular season right now, and I think they're on Super Bowl 42 or 43. And when that season ends, they're going to play their championship at the Glass Bowl. That's going to be a little quirky, but it's going to be fun, darn it. We're going to have a whole bunch of Italian visitors on July 1st. It's going to be a big day because our fireworks are that night. A couple weeks after that, thanks to the leadership of Councilwoman Williams, USA Boxing, the governing body of boxing in this country, is bringing its first ever women's national championship to Toledo, where we're going to see young people compete. And the next month, thanks to the leadership of Councilwoman Sir Sandra McPherson, we're going to have our second Jazz Fest. And we're going to have a lot of fun doing that too. The final thing that I have to say we are doing well in the city and we should be proud of is the strength of our budget. And City Council deserves credit for that, and in particular the chair of our Finance Committee, George Sarantu. We talked earlier about how income tax collections have grown 18% in 1 year. That's incredible. That's a sign of a healthy economy. We have to put those dollars to good use. In 2009, it's not too terribly long ago, our city had a negative rainy day fund of over $16 million. That means we had to rob Peter to pay a debt that we owed to Paul. Even the year before I ran for mayor, our rainy day fund had only grown to about $10 million. At the end of this year, not right now, but at the end of this year, our rainy day fund is going to be at the least $43.5 million. It can't be any lower than that. It could be higher and likely will be, but it can't be any lower. That means in just five or 6 years, we have more than quadrupled the size of our rainy day fund, and that's after COVID. Think of everything we've been through. My goodness, the economy shuts down. To be able to grow our reserves to that level in that amount of time, it's one of the reasons that when Councilman Sarantu and I go to New York City to meet with the bonding agencies, the Standard & Poor and the Moody's to get our bond rating, we meet with all these CPAs with fancy degrees from Ivy League schools. They appreciate the work we're doing. Our budget is in fantastic shape thanks to the leadership of Councilman Sarantu and everyone on City Council. Toledo is a good place. There are good things happening here, but our goodness begins and ends with its people. Toledo is good because its people are good. Last year, you may remember, we created a new award, sort of a Citizen of the Year award. We named it after Irene Drouillard. You might remember her story. She was the young girl, I think she was 15 years old. She was a teenager who in 1922 took $20 to the bank and said, I don't care what you do with it, but I want the mayor 100 years from now just to spend this money for the betterment of Toledo. Now, she put that money in the bank in 1922, not knowing that in 1929, the banks of this country would collapse. So that her 20 bucks never made it to me. But her spirit remains, and we wanted to honor her and her spirit by awarding essentially an Outstanding Citizen Award every year to a younger person and a person young at heart. And so we want to honor we want to announce who our winners are this year. In the category of young at heart, we honor Samantha Boyle, who several years ago went through something that no one wants to go through, and that is losing her son. He was a teenager. He had been bullied, and it was, you can imagine, I can't even imagine how terrible that would be. And you wouldn't blame Samantha Boyle if she tuned out the world and closed the curtains, turned off the lights, and just cashed out. I wouldn't blame her or anyone in that situation if that's what they did. That's not what she did. She turned that tragedy into something positive. She created something called the Lucan T. Boyle Campaign for Kindness, to promote kindness in all its forms everywhere. And now the schools of our community, Washington Local, TPS, the private schools, many of them have kindness rooms, rooms where you can go and just be supported and be loved. It is such a wonderful credit to her, the memory of her son, and she is this year's Irene Drouillard Award winner for her work. And she's here tonight. And I just want to recognize her. Samantha knew that she was going to win tonight. We called her about a week ago or so and invited her to be here. I'm so glad she is. Our youth winner, we knew was going to be here, but he doesn't know that he's about to win. The reason we knew he's going to be here is because he's working here right now. Our youth winner is Jaden Jefferson. But something tells me your dad may have known, or maybe your dad's the ride. Okay. Jaden, and this is not a criticism of anyone else in our local media, Jaden is the best reporter in Toledo. He is. You've seen him with Oprah. You've seen him interview Brad Pitt. You've seen him with Ellen DeGeneres. He makes Toledo proud, and I don't know what his future holds, but his Toledo roots will serve him well. So Jaden is our youth winner this year. So we got some things that we wish weren't going off the rails a little bit, but we're getting better. We got a whole bunch of things that are going well. We got a few challenges on the horizon that I want to make reference to before we conclude, and two in particular as big picture challenges I want to highlight. The first is our need to transition our economy to the electric world that we all know is coming. There's all kinds of talk about trying to attract the battery plants, the 6,000 or 7,000 job facilities that are going to make the batteries that are going to fuel the automobiles of the future. We want to be a part of that. Here's a challenge Toledo has. Think of some of the most exciting economic development projects of the last 10 years. Southwick, Northtown, even the north side of Westgate, which we talked about, the Marina project. All of those, you're talking about 70 acres, 75 acres. These sites now require hundreds of acres, upwards of 1,000 acres. Think of the Jeep plant. I still call it the new Jeep plant, even though it's 25 years ago. When we saved Jeep and moved it from what is now the Overland Industrial Park to, actually Jaden's dad works at Jeep, so he'll know. That new Jeep site is 312 acres. To win these jobs of the future, we need sites 3 times that large. There are no sites like that within the municipal boundaries of the city of Toledo. There are sites like that just outside Toledo, and we have JEDDs and JEDZs where we can share in the economic benefits from developing these sites. We're going to have to be creative, however. We're going to have to think outside the box, however. One such idea is to deploy our resources maybe a little differently than we used to. The City of Toledo owns 2 airports. One is Toledo Express, Gene Kranz. The other is Toledo Executive Airport. It used to be called Metcalf Field. That's 580 acres, and we own it. The fact that we own it saves $14 million at current rates in terms of land acquisition. There are acres around it that can be built into the site that would truly win us what is the holy grail of economic development right now. These battery plants, there's only 2 of them in Ohio. By the way, they're both on 1,000-acre sites. Intel in Columbus, it's not in Columbus. There's no room for it in Columbus. It's in Licking County, 1,000 acres. We have to be creative if we're going to compete in this space. We've been working with the Port Authority closely to bring this to fruition. There's more work to do, but I think we're going to get there. I know we're going to have to be creative in how we approach this. There's one other challenge that I want to reference. It involves our Bayview wastewater treatment plant. We've made a lot of improvements to the Collins Park water plant. In fact, so many improvements that I can say that the water that is treated there now is the best that you'll find anywhere in this country. Ed Moore, our Director of Public Utilities, deserves credit for that. Any project that Ed and his team touch is excellent. His team is installing the new smart meters throughout our community that are more efficient and will be better for consumers and save us money. The fact that there will be no private service lead lines anywhere in the city of Toledo by the time we're done with our art project is a credit to Ed. And the Toledo Waterways Initiative, which was just concluded last year, was another project of the Department of Public Utilities. Unfortunately, we got to do it again. Our wastewater treatment plant on the other side of the river, there are parts of that facility that were built, and this is no exaggeration, in the 1920s. We have hundreds of millions of dollars of improvements that need to be made. We don't have to make them, but then we should all welcome a future where we have sewage backing up in our basements and in our backyards and in our bay. It is very possible that we will have to put an issue on the ballot this November to move forward on it. It's not a levy, it's not a tax, but on a project like this, it is possible, our law department's still researching it, that the citizens simply have to give permission to an expenditure this large. Regardless, that work has to begin, and has to begin now. We have to do right by our basements, our backyards, and our bay. Ed will lead us through there. He'll lead us, but we need to give him the help he needs. Ultimately, as I conclude, that's when you're supposed to applaud. We all have choices to make. We all have choices to make. We can choose to be optimistic or pessimistic. We can choose hope. We can choose fear. Goodness knows there are always going to be people who want us to be afraid. They're always going to want to be people who are pushing their own agenda, always. Often, they may have sown the seeds of the very problems that we confront today. These folks are unburdened by the facts of how we got here, unable to chart a path of where we need to go, and unaware that there's a new spirit of optimism in Toledo, a new spirit of optimism. The old way of thinking here's Saturday night in Toledo, Ohio, and they think of this guy and this song. I don't know how many remember John Denver, the song? It ain't very flattering. There's a new optimism in Toledo. When they hear Saturday night in Toledo, Ohio, they think of this. They think of Gwen Stefani and the Solheim in a city that's ready to show itself off to the world. The old way of thinking thinks of the east side of the river, and they remember the 15 years that the Marina project wasn't developed, the road to nowhere. Heck, if they are historians like me, they'll remember that Toledo's largest Hooverville was right there on the east side of the river. You know what stands where that Hooverville once stood in 1933? This. The Toledoans of today, that's the new ice skating ribbon, they don't see the east side of the river for all of the challenges of the past. They see the new Glass City Metro Park as a city that can reinvent itself on the fly and be anything it wants to be. That is the spirit of Toledo. We have always confronted our challenges together. Sam Boyle had every reason to give up when she dealt with her heartbreak. But that's not what Toledoans do. That's not what we do. We battle back from adversity, we work together, and we turn our tough times into triumphs. That's what we need to do as we confront these challenges. We're making so much progress here in Toledo. And even the things that have held us back recently, the gun violence, we're seeing the beginnings of some progress. Let's keep at it. We're Toledoans, we can do this. We've started the work, let's continue it together. Thank you, God bless you, and God bless the great city of Toledo, Ohio.